Hi everybody, I'm Susan Mulvihill. Welcome back to our garden in Spokane, Washington, where the hardiness zone ranges from 5B to 6A. It's a bit of a chilly April day, but the conditions are perfect for planting broccoli today. I love growing broccoli because they are so incredibly productive. During the growing season, we're harvesting heads and enjoying them with our dinners, but I'm also blanching and freezing a bunch so that we can enjoy it all the way through the winter. We are still eating broccoli that I grew last year, and it's just fabulous. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about plant nutrition, how I prepared the soil in the bed that I'm going to grow them in, dealing with insects, how often to harvest the heads, and other important aspects of plant care. I started these plants indoors on March 10th. The variety is Belstar. I've grown many varieties over the years, but Belstar is definitely my favorite. It is so productive. It takes about 65 days for them to reach maturity. Now today is April 17th, so they're a little bit over a month old. For the past 8 days, I've been putting these seedlings through the hardening off process. This refers to slowly acclimating the plants to the intensity of sunlight, which is way stronger than indoor grow lights. I put them outside in filtered light for 1 hour on the first day, then I bring them back in. On the second day, they're out for 2 hours, again in filtered light, and then being brought back indoors. Over the course of anywhere from 7 to 10 days, you want to increase the amount of sun and the time by 1 hour. They should be in full sun for the last 2 to 3 days of this process. Hardening off is so important, otherwise the leaves will get sunburned, and if it's bad enough, the plants could die. That's not good. So I'm going to put a link to the video I shot on hardening off in the description for this video on my YouTube channel. So this is where the broccoli is going to grow this year. And about 2 weeks ago, I added in half a bag of composted chicken manure to the soil and just worked it into the top couple of inches. The reason I chose the composted chicken manure is because it's high in nitrogen, and that's what cabbage family crops want. So what I want to do next is to lay out these 8 plants so they're evenly spaced within this bed. You'll notice I'm not putting them right next to the edge of the bed, and that's because I want to give them plenty of room within this bed to grow rather than coming outside. So now it's time to plant the seedlings, and my goal is to make holes that are the same size and depth as this root system in the pot. That looks about right. And you never want to pull a plant out of the pot. It's better to support the top and just pat the bottom. And here it is all together. And fill in the soil and press it so that it's making good contact with the root system. I don't want any air pockets in there. Here's another one so that you can see what I'm doing. Checking for depth. That's about right. Carefully upending the pot. Planting it in the hole. Pressing the soil around the root system. And there it is. The next thing I want to do is water in my seedlings, but I also want to give them some liquid Alaska fish fertilizer. That is high in nitrogen, and that is exactly what these little broccoli plants need. Now, in addition to fertilizing the seedlings today, I'm going to do it again with the fish fertilizer in about 2 weeks, and then they should be perfectly fine all on their own. Okay, let's talk about bugs. As I mentioned earlier, cabbage family crops are very susceptible to some very damaging insects. The main ones we encounter here are slugs, cabbage worms of varying kinds, and aphids. Over the years, Bill and I have been experimenting with different methods, and we feel like we have totally nailed it, and I want to share that with you today. So we'll start with slugs, and I wanted to mention that I did shoot a video about dealing with slugs a couple of weeks ago. I'll put a link to it on the description of this video on my YouTube channel. But quickly we'll go through the different methods because there's more than one option for you. Our favorite method is to use copper rings around the base of the seedlings. And we use them for the entire season. It works so well. So this is actually just a piece of some extra plastic drain pipe that we had that's 3 inches in diameter and 1.5 inches tall. And what we did is we bought some Corey's copper slug and snail tape, which is really easy to find at garden centers and online, or you can just find regular copper tape. And the thing about copper is that it reacts electrically when slugs' bodies or antenna come into contact with it. And so if I just put this around the base of this seedling and just make sure it's making good contact with the soil all the way around, slugs will not bother this plant. I know that just sounds so simple and straightforward, but it really works. However, there's a very important step you have to keep in mind. Throughout the growing season, if you see any leaves that are kind of reaching over and about to touch the soil, snip those off from the base of the plant. Because if it does touch the soil, that's an alternate way for the slug to get up into the plant, and then they can cause all kinds of damage. So this is a very simple, inexpensive method. Now this copper might look really old to you, and it is. We've had it on there probably for 3 or 4 years, but it still works. And it's amazing how well it works. So this is my best recommendation to you. You can only use this on plants that have a single stem because you need them to grow up and away from these copper rings. And again, making sure that leaves aren't touching the soil. But this works so well, and I've been telling everybody I can about it. It's even in my bug book that I wrote, because it's such a simple DIY and a great solution to the problem of slugs. Another option for you for dealing with slugs would be to sprinkle slug bait on the soil surface around your plants. It's so important that you use an organic slug bait, and here's why. The non-organic ones have the main ingredient of metaldehyde, toxic to kids and pets. That is not good. Organic ones have iron phosphate as their main ingredient, and that is not toxic to kids and pets. So that's why it's so important to go with the organic version. You can see I have Sluggo here. There's also Sluggo Plus, and that contains spinosad to work against other types of insects. But that is an option for you. Deer traps are another option, and I know that sounds kind of funny. So what you can do is take a little can, like an empty tuna can or a cat food can, and you sink it in the soil so that the lip of the can is even with the soil surface. You fill it about halfway with beer. What happens is the slugs are attracted to the smell of yeast that's in the beer. They come over to get some, they lean down on the inside, fall in, and drown. That's kind of an amusing way to go, right? But it is something that works. But I have to tell you, the copper rings are totally the way to go. They're going to last for years, they're not expensive to do, and they just plain work. This is what agricultural insect netting looks like, and it was really hard for me to track it down, but I kept hearing about it in English gardens and French gardens, and I thought, I really want to try some of this. So it's like a very strong, very tight window screen, even though it's not. And the holes are so tiny, not even aphids go through it. And what I like best of all about it is that I can look through it to see how the plants are doing instead of having to lift the cover off, check the plants, and then put the cover back in place. Now, before I forget, I mentioned how it was really hard to find the agricultural insect netting. Once I did, I thought, I am putting this in my Amazon store because it is so hard to find. So there's 2 different sizes that are in there, and I'll put a link to my store on the description for this video, because this stuff is fantastic and lots of folks have been buying it, and they say, I love this stuff because it's so durable and I love being able to see through it. Now, I wanted to go through the steps for how I would cover this bed. It's not too hard. And one of the things I wanted to mention is how important it is to measure properly before you buy and put your cover into place. Here's why. The amount of cover you need can be deceptive. For example, this bed is 3 feet wide by 8 feet long. So you might think, oh, well, you just need this size for the cover. Actually, you need to measure for a little bit of coverage on the ground because you're going to weigh it down around the perimeter of the bed. You need to measure here. You need to measure up and over your hoops, and then back down on the ground on the opposite side. And for the length of the bed, same thing, starting on the ground, going up and over the hoops you're going to use, and back down to the ground on the other side. You've heard the expression, measure twice, cut once, right? This is an instance where that is so true. I realize that you probably do not have the same setup we do, but the concepts will be the same. So if you've been watching my videos, you probably have noticed these white pieces of conduit that are screwed into the outsides of our raised beds. We put them on all of our raised beds because we're really good about rotating our crops. And that means moving around where you plant things, and it's to have fewer insect and disease issues. So I'm going to take advantage of those because I need to support the hoops, and you will need to do that too. In my case, I'm putting these lengths of EMT or electrical metal tubing in the outsides in these pieces of conduit. So I'm going to put them all the way around, and then we'll go to the next step. So when you're using hoops, you need to support them either by pounding them into the ground, which means you need really tall hoops, or by pounding something like this into the ground, even like pieces of rebar, so that your hoops will be supported well. So that's the purpose of these. Now, a few years ago, we created these hoops. They are made from black plastic poly sprinkler pipe, which is really easy to find in home centers. And they're slipping over those pieces of EMT. And you can see these are pretty tall, but the thing is that these Bellstar broccoli plants will grow quite tall, so I want to give them plenty of room inside so that they grow well. So that looks pretty good so far, doesn't it? Now it's time to put the agricultural insect netting over this set of hoops. It's easier to do with a second person, but I'm on my own at the moment. And I'm going to make sure that I have the same amount at the base of each side and each end, and then weigh it down with boards, bricks, or anything that I have to keep this in place. Now look how easily you can see through the cover so you know how your plants are doing. I think that is awesome. And here's another view just so you can see how I weighted down the outer perimeter of the netting. So I just wanted to clarify that the information I've shared with you today applies to growing all kinds of cabbage family crops. So cabbage, cauliflower, kale, broccoli, of course, and so on. So now what? As far as maintenance goes, you definitely want your broccoli plants or whatever type of cabbage family crop you're growing to get enough water. So they need regular water. Poke your finger into the soil. It should feel lightly moist, like what you'd feel in a wrung out sponge. You don't want it bone dry and you don't want it sopping wet. So you need that middle point. Check on your plants frequently to make sure that everything is going okay in there. If you see some leaves heading towards the soil surface, snip those off carefully so that nothing can get to your plants. As far as harvesting goes, you want to harvest the heads of broccoli when they are firm but have a slight bit of softness to them. It's very hard to describe. And when you cut off a head of broccoli, that doesn't mean that the plant is finished producing for you. Not hardly. They will continue to produce and produce and produce. They'll send up side shoots. I've had them send up additional main heads. And you will be amazed at the amount of harvest that you have from a small amount of plants. I hope this video was helpful and interesting today, and I really appreciate your watching. Happy gardening!